Hello everyone and welcome to my painting demonstration class. And today I'm painting Antarctica. A couple of my friends went there recently and allowed me to use some of their photographs for to work from. They're approaching one of the shores. We've got some fantastic glaciers coming into the water, some beautiful range of mountains. The boat they were sailing on was a group of other people. The stories are amazing and the view is spectacular. So painting this in the winter months coming up to Christmas is extremely exciting as well. So I have picked up a grey background. I've put a similar proportion to the photograph. So I've got quite a panoramic elongated view, elongated board. Primed it with medium grey darkness to support the varieties of cool colours here. We've got some warm colours perhaps on the boat, and we can also exaggerate some of the um, light to add a little bit of extra warmth to it. But most of the colours, the predominant colours, will be cool. So the grey will be a lovely neutral background for it. Now on my palette, I have a little bit of black just to make some of them colors like indigo or mixed reds with the black or anything I might need to make it a little bit darker. And then I have ochre, crimson, white of course, violet, ultramarine, phthalo blue, and emerald green. So a reasonably minimal number of colors. I'll be mainly using the violet, blues, and the green with the white and a bit of black. But the reds and ochre will come in handy as well to have some extra, very gentle but contrasts in color. Right, so first let's do a drawing for our painting. I'm going to use some black and one of the blues as my sketching color. I think I'm going to go for some ultramarine. Okay, I'm going to use the color quite diluted, so it will be easier for me to sketch, and also if I want to wipe it off, that's very runny consistency of the paint. Right, so first of all, I'm going to identify where I'm going to have my halfway through point, probably that where the water meet the icebergs. So it's approximately halfway through my picture, maybe deliberately making it tiny bit, maybe more water than what's above the horizon. So if my halfway through point will be probably somewhere here, maybe if I'll just put it just a little bit higher. Okay, just approximately. Okay. If you struggle to draw a straight line, you can always use a piece of paper. You can just measure the similar length and then just mark it in various locations and then just connect that line as well. And just another option to make it a little bit easier if needed. Right, next I'm going to look for my line of the mountains. Quite like to see a steep start on the left hand side. Okay, now it's harder to judge how much space it's going to actually take. So again, if I were to divide my picture approximately into half here, width-wise, I want to find where this peak is going to be. So if this is approximate half, okay, not quite half, maybe somewhere here. Okay, maybe even still more, a little bit more now on the left. If I stay in the middle of my board, it might be easier to judge it. Okay, good. And that peak, I'm just looking for an approximate proportion. What's wider here? Yeah, and what element is a little bit narrower? How does it look? Approximately somewhere here, perhaps. So it means I can make my peak here. Okay. Okay. I want to leave a little bit extra space for the sky. We don't want to leave this peak too close to the border. Otherwise, everything becomes just slightly too attached to them, to the top. We don't really want to crop that point. I might even deliberately make it a tiny bit lower. Okay. And then it will be easier for me to find the shape somewhere here. Maybe that width will be a bit more greater. Maybe I can look for more variety into the slopes. Looks a little round. If I were to look more carefully into the tip of that peak, it's actually got a lovely character. I'm more interested into observing it, and if I want to correct it, or if I want to create my own version of it, that's absolutely fine. But that's observation, that's what's important, to creating that character. Okay. And let's see. Might start planning a little bit of the widths of the icebergs. They're huge in space, apparently. They look quite small as an edge, but it's a very big drop. Quite dangerous for the boat to come close because they're constantly moving, they're constantly crashing into the water. You don't know when it's going to happen. Okay, so that might just give me a different width, and that looks like more of a bay. It's something you can go around. So the level of the water might just gently change. For now, I'm just going to keep a straight line. But what I can see is that overall width of that iceberg, and then suddenly that width of the iceberg dropped to a narrower version. That tells me that overall it's a different distance further back. Okay, and on this side we see elongated slope. It's probably the closest to us. It looks like more of a round bay here if we were looking above, but we're really close to it, so we only see the horizontal line. Okay, so you can see that drop here. Yeah, that tells me that this shape creates the base, so it's getting gently smaller in the middle, perhaps a little bit taller up. You're not going to see a huge difference between um, uh, the height here. It's absolutely fine to keep it flat because it might be a slightly different shore as well. Just going to check the peaks here. Okay, so all of that is nice dark shape. Gonna have it planned roughly, and then I'm going to look at some of the darks and compare my shapes and their positioning. Okay, where's this little peak is going to be? Okay, maybe a shorter distance than this way. Okay, that's hopefully will be fine for us. Snowy peaks, more exposed peaks. Okay. I just move this one a little more further close. Just give that space. It's almost at the tip of this ridge. You can see how that eye's been dragged down, probably cut into its side. Mm. And now let's have a look at the boat. I'll have a look at the range of the mountains in a moment. Let's see how much space it takes. So if this is halfway through my picture, the boat, if I look for the base of the boat, not the railings, it just gives me that almost similar space as that peak of the mountain, approximately. And it's not going all the way to the horizon, although the barriers are not too far from it, so maybe the barriers will be approximately somewhere here. And what type of angle is used here. So I can place the handle of my brush against it and just drag it. Okay, I think that's going to be an approximate. Okay, maybe a little bit more closer here. And the other side, I can't quite see where the edge of the boat is going to be on the left-hand side, but I can see the sail is folded. I can see where, kind of, again, approximate diagonal for it. Okay, so we're looking about something here. Maybe somewhere there. And the sail could go just a little bit up and down off the deck. We can look at that a little more after. And there is the middle of the deck here, some red lines on the floor. A little further, a little sharper perspective here. Just makes us ground the picture a little more. Okay. And if I were to place some of the railings, which are leaning towards, no, it looks like they're leaning towards the center of the boat. And the top is starting to get a little higher. And in perspective, those gaps become smaller and then they disappear. Mine are actually much darker than what they are. By the time we play in the ice, they probably will disappear. There, bringing them out more. Yeah, but the railing is not perfect. It's got that curvature. It's probably been in a few journeys, voyages. Looks like all of that continues right through. Okay. And I'm interested to put a few of the almost verticals, just gently leaning straight lines, just gently lean towards the left. That lovely rhythm. Yeah, every gap is slightly different. Okay, I think that's approximately where we want it to be. Okay. Looking at them, some of the spaces here. I think maybe that line is going to be a bit different. Yeah, I think it's looking out somewhere here. Okay. So while the approximate positioning of the shapes is there, I'm going to look very quickly at some darker tones using the same colors, ultramarine and black. It's good to continue staying quite runny, as long as it's not too light. Okay, and I want to go and find some shapes. Normally I'd pick up a larger brush, but there's some finer shapes here of the dark, so I think the smaller brush will be better. And I can tweak my snow lines in comparison to the shapes of dark. If these lines are not aligning with my ropes, I'm not too worried. You do more than you need, you can always paint over it. Trying to look for those positive, negative spaces, approximate shapes, looking for larger shapes better than the nuances. Okay, this solid block will stay dark. I just explore it by cutting into it, explore its linear shapes. It's how the rock is breaking down, how the rock is leaving the ledges for the snow to settle, showing its character. I might leave little white gaps, but if you were to paint it all dark and then just put that lighter line later, I'm just more testing the appearance of it. I think I might have gone a little too low here. In doubt, just paint it all dark. Observe it, make mental notes. For the later addition of details. And a little one here as well. They appear in quite similar size on the photo. I might elongate one a little bit more, exaggerate, make it work even better on my picture. Okay. Just seeing it all together. We're looking for some silhouettes and shapes, but actually looking the whole linear work here. And there is an open space somewhere here. Maybe a couple of these will go a little higher. Good. I'm also gonna look for some darkness in the water. There are some rocks reflecting. There's a lot of small pieces of ice floating, but we can see some of the bold, darker shapes quite strongly reflecting in the water. So some here. Honestly, the form changes because it does get covered by the water, and overall I can feel that this area is just a little extra darker. And so is these shapes. And if they were to continue, we can mirror them. I just can see something dark in this area. Okay. Where the ice is a little bit more clearing, you can see a little extra darkness there as well. Right, let's oversee the drawing so far, and let's work into the color. Right, just stepping away from my picture, I'm going to make a decision of doing a little bit more darker tones, maybe exaggerated darkness, but darkness on the boat. A few shadows, a few shapes which are a little bit obscure, but they are giving us a sense of space. Even if I paint it quite simplified. Okay, even this water could make a difference by painting the water slightly darker here. And a few connecting spaces here as well. Spaces of darkness. I think that one's gonna look too far. In comparison to my earlier drawing, would have been fine, but I've adjusted it a little closer to us. This adjusting it to this line, but it's not in there. That's my old line. So this is the line I am using. And the red Okay, that's better. Just make some little imperfections here on the deck. Just some shadows. Okay, now I'm happy with my tonal drawing. And let's change to color. I'm going to start painting with a sponge. So I've just soaked it and rinsed it really well. And I'm going to start with some of the lighter tones, not full strength, but I have got my medium darkness, I've got my darks, so I need some extra light. I think I'm going to start with the sky. So if I'll pick up some white and some ultramarine. Now, I don't want it to be direct fresh blue, so perhaps a hint of black, just a minuscule amount, just to make the blue less fresh blue. Okay, I'll test my color out. Yeah, it is much lighter. The lightest tones in the painting is going to be the sky and the snow on the lower part of the glacier, where it's becoming much more shallow in angle. It's much darker on the tops, and also the whites on the water. Now that those icicles, floating ice, I'll paint last. At least most of it will be touched last. So I'm looking at my board. It is quite a darker gray. It is quite against the white palette. So even it appears quite light, I think it will dry a little bit darker. And also, by the time we'll fill in the spaces, I don't think it's going to be as light. So I'm just trying to find a bit more of a silhouette, which I can still shape up if I wanted to make changes. Right. Yeah, a little bit more darker down in the top. Maybe that sky's tried to open up. Maybe it's the weight of the clouds. Okay, just a little more of that darkness here. So I'm still almost painting in a very simple way, but quite blocky. The sponge allows me to have that quick painting and making decisions quite quickly. Just using the edge of the sponge to make a little more sharper borders. Sometimes it's harder to see where I'm putting that line. Sometimes I can just about see under the sponge. And again, if I wanted to exaggerate some of the sharpness of the peaks or the particular angle, maybe this one will be partially eventually lost in a bit of a fog, or that base of air. Okay, I think this area could go slightly darker. Make sure you have got enough paint. If you were to paint alongside of me, we need that paint to keep, so we don't have too much transparency. Actually start seeing the color rather than just plain gray. Yeah, that didn't want that mountain to have like a white border around it. It's a little bit more of a white border here, so I'll need to resolve that as well. And I'm also going to watch how the background is going to dry. Okay, some of those blocks are almost done. For now, that will be sufficient enough. What I do want to add is slightly warmer color. So if I were to add a dab of ochre to my paint mixture. Now, if I just use ochre and ultramarine, it will give me not quite the green color, but the color will go towards the green. So I'm going to add small amount of violet to neutralize that and turn it back into the warmth. Okay. So what that will give me, if I'll make it slightly lighter here, is the warmer shape of light. Just need to make sure I mix it well so there's no streaks of violet or ochre. And also after I place some of these shapes, I'm going to watch it dry and see if that's sufficient enough amount or where it could work slightly differently. I'm going to perhaps layer it over with some fresher whites or fresher grays. Now, if there are any finer areas where I need to go in between the mountains to make some of the areas lighter, I can give it a go with a sponge, but also bear in mind that I will come back with a brush. I think that might give me more definition And also it doesn't have to be as big quantities, it might be quite a soft amount. No, don't want to have sharp borders here, so if I'll use the back of the sponge, we'll just soften it. It's okay with exaggeration if you want to exaggerate a little light. Never be worried about things like that. Emphasizing some of the shapes. Okay, that looks a little straight. Okay, I'm gonna let it be and let it dry. Okay. Now for the next layer of light, where I was saying there's quite a little extra light area, I will use some fresh white and perhaps a hint of emerald green. Okay, that's very strong color, so if I'll go very pale. Okay. And perhaps for the first layer, I'm just going to make the color, so the whole shape light, without too much definition or variety of color. I'll go a little not as precise. There's some smudges. I think I just need a clean side of the sponge, which I don't have. Another reason I'm using a sponge now, if I use a brush, first of all, it will take me longer to work, which means that I'll start overthinking and start looking into too many small details. When working with sponge, doesn't allow me to make small shapes. The opposite, it's creates quite large marks. And unifies the picture, which is exactly what we want. Do a little more here. And then I can wash my sponge and then check the variety of darknesses within that white, or at least tidy up some of my darks, which I might have a little overpainted, which at this stage is fine. Never be scared of going up over certain areas and then coming back, tidying them up. This peak looks like a little bit lighter here as well. I'm going to wash my sponge. I just want to clean up some of the dark colors. For example, here. If it's still damp, it will come off. If not, I might have to work with it and work with some extra darkness. and top. I think that the shapes are fine. Give some nice variety of tone. Okay, that's okay. All right, the next one I'd like to paint the water as a big shape of darkness, ignoring the ice in the water. So again, if I'll start with some white and got that a lot of the turquoise color, so emerald green, phthalo blue. Now on its own, they will give me a beautiful turquoise, but it will be too fresh. I will need a little more black to tone it down, to give that depth to it. We're only talking about a small amount. Okay, maybe even more. Now on the screen it looks much more grayer. I can see quite a lot of green in here. Just checking it against the whole picture. Okay. Maybe a little bit more gray rather than color. Otherwise, I might have the appearance of Mediterranean Sea. Okay, that's too light. But this lighter tone could come close to the shore. There's a lot of floating ice. Might be even lighter there. A bit more lighter farther back. So I'm planning the darkness of the water, if it's going to be the most light close to the shore, how much more darker it will and how gradually will that tone develop further away. Lighter here close to the boat, it looks a little bit darker away from it as well. And again, continue to add more white, so there is a base to the color. Quite a dark tone. Also want to test it against some of the darker water, because if you squint your eyes, this area of the water is much darker in comparison to the boat. So we'll just test it out here. It's all loads of area here. It's very suggestive. So can I see the contour there? And it's going to get lost. Maybe even that contour might need to be even darker. This area might be darker than what I've just done. Emerald green, bit of black. Maybe one of the blues. I need to paint it more flat as a color. Yeah, paint it over my barriers here. But I need to see the whole shape. Let's test some of that darkness. That's pretty good. Might be even darker. I think the water here will be the most difficult part, because it's not just the depth of the color, it's how the icicles, the iceberg, the small bits of ice is bombarded into this area. Also, how do we show those reflections of much darker shapes of the mountains without showing too much three-dimensional shapes? Maybe I need to wait for this area to dry so that I can see the picture a little bit more clearer, and also allow the colors overlap. Quite a lot of gray in here. Need to be patient to see how it actually dries. Just gently blending it out, gently getting some extra color in. Okay, let's give it some time to dry. Let's see what it gives us. Now, I want the colors slowly drying. I'll make sure that it properly dried. I'm going to start working in other areas. I want to establish some of them that width of the ice. So I'm going to use now a brush and work in a bit more stronger color. I'm going to use some white and some fresh, no black used this time, some fresh phthalo blue and emerald green. I'm looking for some shadows, but I'm also looking for sublight. So if I were to block that ridge altogether as a shape, then I can subdivide it and maybe add extra varieties of darkness in there. So just putting a mark here, it just looks too pale. So I just increase that darkness. It shouldn't be as dark as the water. It's something in between. The water in places will look lighter because of some of the busyness of the area with the ice there. Okay, I think that will work better. And I have a horizon line which is dark. I think if I were to have some of it left, that would be good, but also some of that line will become white. You can see some of connections on the border where it stays lighter, where it's become slightly darker. Now, it's quite an intricate shape, silhouette-wise, but if I block it first, and I can make that variety of indentations into this shape with a lighter tone, I think it will be better because I'll be defining those shapes after anyway. Okay, not overly perfect with my choice of shapes as I'm just talking and not observing enough, so let's just focus a bit more. Again, I can tweak it when I'll start using lighter color above. Okay. And that's the area where it starts being much smaller. Just going to need to check that my line of the water is tiny bit higher, and also double check that my line doesn't go down. Not sure if it's my screen or if it's my board a little bit lifting and it looks like it's not quite straight. I'll paint as it feels right, and then I'll step away from it, from my painting, and double check. I think this one's gone a little bit lower. Maybe the water will have to come up a little higher. Okay, and let's have a look here. Now, the closer we get to the left-hand side, the more violets I start to see. So if I'll continue with my turquoise first. It is harder for you to see on the screen, those colors, but also I am exaggerating them. I am looking, I'm trying to compare to them to the other gray shapes, and do they started to look a little bit more into the violet. Okay, if I use slightly more white, because I have green in my paint, violet and green will give me more of a neutral blue. So if I want to have more violet, I need to have fresher white to compensate. Yes, it does look quite pale. For the moment, I will add some darker shadow, so lighter shadows here, so these shapes will eventually start changing its flat appearance. Okay, maybe a bit more violet in this areas. And again, let's just double check. Line. There's a slightly darker line here under the iceberg. So I might just persevere and make it darker by using my violet and green together. Will give me a sharper pigment. No, not giving me enough sharpness. Not enough contrast. I think it might be exposed rock as the water is washing away the softer part of the ice. Done more of a straight line, more of a solid line. It's not going to be that continuously perfect. Again, it's something I will need to come back to. A little bit of darkness here and there. And can I start adding slightly darker edges? I think that might be easier to do if I use it on a dry surface. I think this one is almost dry. And then if some of them will come up too sharp or too bold, I'll just use a sponge to make them slightly vague or in less of a contrast. And it allows to see less details and more of a suggestion of shadows. So these shadows appear where less light can get to the corners of the glacier, which was knocked away by the water. So if we've got slopes, then we've got straight corners, and then we'll have some inner surfaces which will give us those shadows. Okay, this is just water. Okay. And I want two representative shapes. I want more suggestive ones. Okay, I think this one could stay slightly darker here as well. But do I need to have it sharpness, bold? Maybe not. So painting lighter tones first gives us an opportunity to cover most of the surface and give a general feel for that surface, and then the shadows coming in some areas only to find the extra depth. The closer the shapes to me, the less I probably will be smudging them. They could have more contrast borders. Also want to have some of that color reflected in the water, especially if it's so close to more defined patterns here. They will be covered by the icebergs, mini icebergs. Okay, but I think that will be a hint of those are darker shapes. Okay. It's harder to see it on the screen, and especially while it's still damp. Okay, let's allow this area to dry as well. I'll just cover some of the grays I have not covered and have a look at some of the whites and the mountains. Quite like the use of this size brush, so I'm going to continue with it. Okay, so let's have some fresh white. Mixed maybe just with some phthalo blue now. No, I picked up some ultramarine. Right, so then let's have a look at the ultramarine. Maybe ultramarine will have more on the will appear more on the tops of the peaks. Phthalo blue probably will have some in the lower areas, close to some of the greens, close to less dark areas of snow. So it looks dark here. Again, if I'm putting it against my picture, the sky and the mountain edge are clashing. So it means that I need to make my sky dark lighter in that area, which I think will be a better choice, or my mountain shadow will need to be darker, or a bit of both. Mountain will be slightly darker, that snow in the shadow. But also I will pick up another brush in a moment and check that contrast at the same time. The color needs to appear flat, so that shapes will read better. If there are streaks or patchy areas, that will be less much easier, much harder to depict that form. Okay, it gets a little lighter here to come into the border, so it's probably just changes its surface area, just getting itself exposed from one angle to another. I'm going to try to avoid perfect borders with my darks. This could be done by adding sub kind of nuances of where the snow line is going to be. Also could be done by just softening it with a sponge, not everywhere, but in just a couple of places, so it's more lost and found than very much defined. Okay, that's better. Bring the slide back. A little bit at a time so I can constantly compare shapes. Okay, it will be much easier if we not go one area and try to find all the definitions and wonderful nuances, but think of big shapes. It's harder because there's so much variety of texture. So I might make a decision on overpainting amount of blue than I need and come back to the blacks. A little shadow on the side. Also, I have got much lighter tone here. If I want more white here, I don't start with direct white. I build it starting from medium darknesses, and then as it dries, add extra texture of light. A bit more darkness again. So then I can follow with my sky color, following these peaks and making a decision on how they're changing, what are they bordering, lighter tone or darker one. Maybe this ultramarine will make also the appearance. Now the shapes are dry and I can see it a little stronger. The need for it, for that lovely ultramarine. Lovely and playful surfaces. Make this edge less perfect. Mhm. Even have a little hint of reflections there. And again, might be a good way of simplifying shapes later. Just give us that little hint of light. I'm going to use now slightly lighter color and perhaps a little warmer color. So if I'll go for my white, a dab of ochre, that will make it quite golden, bold white. Probably not gonna have many strokes of that. But if I were to use a small amount of violet, yeah, that still appears very white-like. The plan is to introduce some of that color and then integrate it, smudge it in the sky. I'm going to use a sponge. I don't want to have a line. I want to see some of the shape. I'll have the light from behind of the mountains. So some of this color will appear a little stronger and wider. Okay, that's too small. Not just that sponge, might even put it a little bit on a sponge so it just smudges easier. It's not just lifts it and doesn't drag it anywhere else. That's quite nice to have some of that color. And now it's almost gone. Yeah. So maybe that light will also come in from here. As I said, I'm exaggerating its boldness. Okay, that's quite a boring shape. Let's wait for it to dry. A little extra light here, although I'm running out of my paint. Might give me an opportunity to change the color. If I'll go more into the phthalo blue, just extra white. So it will be different light, cooler light. Against my ultramarine phthalo blue will stand out, as well as the lights of the color. Like a little mist or misty area. Because I used a sponge, my paint wasn't thick enough, so it's very likely it will dry paler and show the previous layers. That's why I might need to work into those shapes again as it dries. So I've got some warm white light and some cooler light, both coming close together. Mhm. So just need to be a bit more softer. Change. Otherwise, it looks like I've got a mountain here as well. Okay, one here, I actually have got a little mountain. Big. A slightly lighter blue and go for phthalo blue instead of ultramarine. It will be different. Can also put slight pale white wash over it when it dries, and it will give me an idea that it's much far back. I want it to look like a perfect pyramid. Mhm. some of the darkness here, so I can come back to that. Just taking any other shapes I can make more belonging to the surface. Using slightly lighter blue as well. That gives the ultramarine blue an extra variety. I think this area is still a bit wet. And I'm slowly going to start introducing more fresher white as well for the borders where the snow is starting to shine a bit more. Right, now I'm going to exaggerate some of the white. So if I go fresh white, but my brush is not perfectly clean, so it will give me still not a fresh white, which is good. I don't really want a bold, strong white yet, if I would want it here in the first place. Let's just find some of these borders where the white is the strongest. I'll have my sponge close by if I need to smudge anything. Okay. Extra white here. It's quite thicker white. Just want to establish that ridge. Here I've got the ice moving over time, so it's that classic river of ice. A little extra light where its surface become much more horizontal. That's more of a suggestive separation of light and dark. Needs to be a bit softer. And some fresher white in the front here just shows how much it's stays at the kind of sticks out. Also might want to add a little extra darker tone to have that contrast slightly greater. And over some of these areas, this looks a bit more bolder. And perhaps again on the ridge, as the surface is changing, it's flat direction. It's another glacier, river of ice, moving extremely slow, but certainly moving. You can see it on the slow recordings. Also use this paler white, or maybe a slightly diluted version of this white, just to put a couple of areas lighter. Maybe there is a breaking point. Maybe just how it turns towards us. Got that classic look of an iceberg and block of ice close to the water, where the water have some darker tones. This gives us those lovely contrasts. Such a small areas, so smudging them is a little harder. It's all removes a lot, or not quite doing the job. Now persevere. Start to have a feel that penguin might come up the surface. We might spot a walrus somewhere. I've more sea lions playing in the water. Maybe those black and white ochres, quite vicious and very much camouflaged under the environment. Okay, that's lovely. Might let it be, let it dry. Tiny bit of darkness, a mist or light mist here. A bit of dry brushing. If I wipe my brush off, just have a drag off. That's better. Okay, and what I don't like, I can just wipe or shape after. That dry brushing really worked for me. It might be drying a little paler, but the effect is there. I can always come back and do a little stronger dry brushing. Stronger meaning with a bolder white. Might just test it a little more here. I think some of this white will have to do more of the dry brushing as well. And I might do the dry brushing back with a darker color as well to have the ridges more spontaneous. Right, anything else? A little more here. While this dry brushing is working well, I'm ready to add some of that sharpness a little more. Not everywhere. Mhm. Right, I'm gonna let the mountains dry and my eyes to actually take shape by letting it be. That's much more natural again. Bit of playing with partially dry, partially loaded with white brush. And let's have a look at the boat and the water. I'm gonna come back to my sponge because I want to have some bigger shapes painted for the boat. So if I'll start with some white, ochre, violet again, and work with a little extra coolness from ultramarine. There's some warmth there in comparison to the rest of the colors. Even my current gray looks warmer, appears warmer. That's quite a similar gray, so maybe a little bit warmer. Yeah, my current gray appears much warmer than the water. Okay, slightly more warmth. I can change it to slightly more violet color, and that range of color will be exciting. Maybe more ochre for part of the sail, and then I can work with highlights on it. and extra shadows. It's quite a lot of darkness there, so I might bring more violet and ultramarine there. Maybe even a tiny bit of black. Probably not going to see much of that black, but sometimes ultramarine doesn't give me enough darkness with the violet. That's a better option. That's it. Otherwise, I'll end up just repainting it. Okay, and I just want to see some more blocks of light and dark here. It's quite nice standing out against some of my earlier darker marks. I'll have more ultramarine, tiny bit lighter with some fresh white. Not tiny bit more lighter. Gives more suggestion of what's there. If I would have been painting with a brush, it would have been too precise. The details will need to come in the same playful way without overtelling everything. I might even put extra shadow here with a sponge. It is quite a small defined shape. So a little harder with a sponge, but it makes me see the shapes of the shadows and smudge the colors. Okay, that's maybe a little too playful smudge. Yeah, the width of the sponge is not allowing me to. And this line is going to be mainly red, so if I make it slightly narrower. Yeah, it's looking good. Okay, well, the boat surface is drying. I'm going to start looking at the water. For this, I need a larger, a little bit rougher brush. So I've got a hog brush. I'm going to have my clean sponge close by as well, as I'm going to start introducing some diluted white or kind of white, which is not a pure fresh, might be mixed with a little ultramarine. I can apply it as a dry brush and then perhaps smudged with a sponge to have the foggy effect in the distance, and then slowly start identifying some of the shapes coming close to us. I think I'm going to keep kind of pale. I've got a tiny bit of violet and ultramarine first with my white. I think the close I'm going to come to the front. I'm going to move towards emerald green because quite a lot of that ice is in the water. We see it under the water. So if I paint those slightly darker emerald green type of shapes, then I can paint some peaks, much lighter tone. So I'm going to just do glaze and work into that surface. It will appear partially broken and partially strong. Okay, so maybe something like this. And then I don't want it to be all similar, so that smudginess, that softness will come in. I also want to see a little bit of sharpness of the water, but by seeing the original darker blue. So that's why I painted darker blue, the darkness of the water. That's why I painted it slightly darker. So by the time I put my dry brushing strokes, the surface will start to appear much lighter. Okay. So that's my distant. You can see how that lovely shape start floating. Okay. If it's too wet and I want to add anything else, I can just skim the brush sideways. If it doesn't work, I can always remove it and come back when it's drier, maybe repeat the process. Becomes more of a smudgy, bigger lines, and I want to have more individual strokes. So perhaps if I use a tissue to dry it, I can do it quicker. Okay. Maybe a little bit of green now on my brush. Can even try some of the shapes close by. It'll be nice and soft closer to me, because they're underwater. It's harder to see precise shapes. Okay, I might copy some of the shapes, but then might look for the directions of them. And because the boat is going in and the water started to kind of give, if not waves, gives a direction to calmer. So they're a little bit more flat on a flatter surface somewhere here. And they started to have a bit of a motion elsewhere. Now, I could be here forever if I were to paint every single piece of ice here. So I'm going to have a fluid, kind of a quick effect. The feel for it. And also we'll need to wait for the layers to dry and evaluate it. So I'll paint a little bit more and then I will be stopping. I might in this area quite like the depth of the water. I might have closer eyes and then leave the rest of the water untouched. Just gives, maybe there's a bit of clearance here. So if that works, that might be a really good way of dealing with that. Okay, I'm going to go for slightly whiter paint and just skimming. Okay, it is quite chunky bits of white. It's okay to have an odd, wider or taller kind of shape, but I really want to have more. That's quite nice. I like this one. So I'm picking up what I like and I'm going to remove what I don't. Okay, that might be a longer piece of ice. Yes, I haven't quite got it on my photograph, but there are some longer pieces of ice somewhere here in the distance. And again, sharper tops, softer bottoms for these strokes. Okay, we've got some of those black reflections. Can I paint anything over them or close to them to take the full attention away from them? Okay. Can put a little bit more stronger white. Some of these shapes. This is quite close to me, so the top could be much more sharper. But also this ice is constantly turning. It melts on the top. Or it just melts as it keeps turning because it's loses its balance. So it comes up and down and loses its sharpness. So it might have some of that change in its boldness. It's quite good. And let's paint some of the tops here. Maybe deliberate grouping a little more. So I'm now looking at my picture more than on the photograph. I'm looking for variety of shapes. I'm looking for range of length. I'm looking for sharp and soft borders as well as consistency of variety and of the borders. Okay, that's good. The more solid white I use, the more kind of stronger, larger piece of ice is going to be. And it shouldn't have as many soft borders because it's, oops, I just bought some blue paint by accident here. Because that color, that white, that ice is going to be much more solid, much more harder in its texture. So maybe I'll use a different brush to do that. Okay, I'm gonna let them dry for the moment. These lovely icicle shapes, icy shapes. Any of them are too strong for me to leave as they are. And I think that's okay. I want to see how they're drying as well. I want to see if they're showing more of a true color or if they are already showing what they're going to, how they're going to appear. And I want to look at the boat's highlights and then its ropes. So I have some white, maybe just make sure my brush is not runny, haven't got much watery paint. Okay, so I'm using some ochre, some white, a little bit of violet. It will be much lighter color. So let's bring a couple of those shapes in. Okay, looks a little too bright and taking too much attention. Okay, let's tone it down. Dry the surface so I can paint on the dry surface quicker. So let's get more violet. You see a stronger highlight somewhere here. So maybe if I'll start with that. And that could remain a little more bolder. So I'm looking for overall areas of light without too much attention to what it is. I know it will be all the creases of the fabric. Maybe not quite the right color, but it's highlight, and I'm connecting those lights together. Okay, that's good. And also some cooler light, again back to perhaps some of the blue. And any highlights on the boat or around the boat. Some areas it might look like an icicle, or sorry, an icicle, a nice piece of ice in the water, or on its border, or those shapes might come in and out on the borders of the boat. It is very much highlighted V shape. Maybe I will break it down by showing something on the side. And I think my pieces of ice are going to have a little softer edges, some of them. And little suggestions of that white. You never know what's underneath of the surface, how big, and our mini icebergs, it applies exactly the same to bigger shapes of ice or smaller shapes of ice. tiny bit more fresher white around this area so I can then do the railings without touching the white behind them, not coming back to that water. Yeah, that's good as well. That's good. Maybe a couple here as well, so to have more definition on the water, to make the water stronger in its depth. Have a general speed here, showing the water reflecting. Okay, it's quite nice. Right, then let's have a look at part of the barriers. Ideally, I want to have a brush which will help me doing some straighter lines, and my Filbert brush is a good brush for it. So I'm going to clean this same brush here, and let's have some paler color first. I'm going to use a bit of blue, a bit of violet, a bit of ochre. Could use a bit of black, any of those colors. I haven't used much red yet. Maybe red and black will be a good suggestion as well. But I'm going to work with light darkness initially, and a runny, not super runny so I can't control it, but much more diluted with water paint. So at any point, if I need to wipe it off or paint it, I don't want it to be too distinct. I can always make it darker. If I would have been able to see my initial lines, that would be really good, but I can't. So I'm going to see if I were to create new ones. Okay, not non-matching a connection, especially against them, the white. Okay, I don't like it not being too straight. Okay. So let's find some of these key ropes. I enjoyed looking at variety of widths between them. So maybe giving a rough guide for them, and only then tidying them up. For example, adding more, or maybe keep quite a lot of them suggestive and bring some darker tones only to smaller areas. Okay, tiny bit more darker tone for the railings themselves. Bit of red. Otherwise, against my water, I can't see them. Slightly wider. Okay, can't see them here either. I think they're just reflecting at the same time, merging with the similar darkness of the water. I just played with a little bit of those railings and the different angles, so I could see them a little better, so it's less reflective for me. But there is a little more work to do here. Just maybe defining some of the highlights or bringing extra shadows. But once I've done it lighter, I can darken them up in certain areas, maybe to make some of the ropes a little stronger in a couple of areas, so they're a bit more defined. It's good that they are also partially in that environment and lost. Okay. Quite like the idea of them being quite suggestive. Okay, so is the railings here as well. But again, I'll have to give time for things to dry. I want to see shapes a bit better. I want to, I think, explore the deck a little bit more. I'm still working its shapes out. I think I just had the board and the different angles and felt I could do some adjustments to some of the shadows. So I'm going to be stopping now and looking back at the painting and everything else later on. I think I probably will need to work on my key mountain with some extra darks and perhaps just enlarge some of the darker tones. Now I've painted the ropes there, but it's not a big deal. I can work around them. Quite like some of these areas. I'm quite happy with some of those elements. I quite like the water. Again, I will look at the overall view of the water, perhaps a sweeping thinner lines of white close to the shoreline will be beneficial. If I'll just do one, just to give myself again that idea, that feel for it, and then it will be reference point to what I'll need to work on. So if I'll use the same flat velvet brush with some fresh white, a little bit diluted, but to have that white line border partially present, partially disappears. We've got lost and found of the darker line, so we can do the same with the white. It just shows how the eyes border turns and shifts. Okay, and also it will give me that reflection if I just leave some little bit of a gap. Yeah, so that's all of these small pieces of ice becoming in the distance a lighter group. There, that's already looking better as well. And they've got some nice clearance. Yeah, there isn't much white icebergs, ice going here. Maybe a little bolder white as well, not just all smudgy. Maybe that bolder white will go on the soft areas here. And that again gives me time to make my decisions, see how shapes unite together. Okay, these are maybe a tiny bit more together as well. If any shapes need a little more encouragement. And yes, I'm no longer looking at the photograph of a precision. If I need some sort of reference to an idea of how shapes might be, how that white or any other elements will kind of start looking more natural, I will look at the photo. But otherwise, now most of the work will be done from what I already have and defining and improving what I already have. So thank you so much for staying with me today. I hope you had fun watching me, and you might want to do your own little Antarctica landscape. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in my future classes. Bye bye.